Welcome. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start in a moment to allow folks to enter into the meeting from the lobby. Hi, my name is Michelle Cunningham, Marketing and Outreach at Healthcare Workforce Development. We are excited that you have joined us today. Before we begin, I would like to discuss a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and posted on our website. The chat option is open. We will entertain those questions in the chat during the question and answer sessions. In addition, during the Q&A, your mics will be enabled and you'll be able to raise your hand to ask questions. This slide deck is posted on our website and the webinar recording will be posted after the webinar. I am thrilled to introduce our first presenter, Ann Powell, Health Program Specialist with the Healthcare Workforce Development.
Thank you, Michelle. First, I want to just welcome everybody. We're very excited about this opportunity today. I'll describe it in more detail. But the first thing I want to do, next slide, is talk about the purpose of this program and some of the key items that we want to get out of it. So the purpose of the Social Work Education Capacity Expansion Grant Program, we call it SWEES, is to increase the supply of social workers trained to provide behavioral health care to children, youth, and adults served in public and nonprofit settings. So why do we have this program? This program is part of our overall workforce portfolio designed to increase the capacity of schools and organizations to train more providers. We also recognize the urgent and long-standing need to build our behavioral health workforce, especially social work. And we recognize the need to diversify our workforce and to build a workforce trained to meet the needs of our diverse Californians. Next slide. So I'm going to take a few minutes here to talk about the basic elements of the program, and then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A after I finish my few slides. So the first thing is that we have committed $60 million in the current funding cycle, one of several, I'll note, and that this $60 million is to support two activities. One is to increase the number of Masters of Social Work students admitted to existing programs each year over the next 5 years, and to establish new MSW, BASW, and or BSW programs. And let me just hasten to note here, was recently brought to my attention, thank you, Maxwell, that we recognize that advanced standing MSW programs are for BSW students only. So while that was said something different in the grant guide, we know that is the case. Next slide. So first of all, HCI may award full, partial, or no funding to an applicant based on the applicant's criteria score and the amount of funds available. While $60 million sounds like a great deal of money, when you consider that we have in excess of 35 schools in California, we know that that money won't go far. The allocation of funds will depend on application evaluation results and geographic coverage across California. Next slide. So we fund two programs, as I mentioned earlier, new programs, and the purpose of the money for new programs is to support efforts to obtain national accreditation by the Council on Social Work Education. The second purpose of the funds is to support operational costs associated with admitting additional MSW students, recognizing that the first year of activity will be spent developing an expanded program, including such things as CSWE approval of new faculty to student ratios or expanded faculty. And then finally, we do not support administration. We do not support the supplantation of existing funds that universities are receiving for this purpose. This is for new activity only. Next slide. For new programs, as I mentioned earlier, we are interested in supporting MSW, BASW, and BSW programs over a 3-year period. The goal is that programs receive their accreditation by January 31, 2026. Grantees can receive partial payments as select accomplishments are reached over this 3-year period. And then the final payment is received when or is released when we receive proof of national accreditation, as well as the final program report. Next slide. For expansion programs, these are 5-year grants, and the first year, as I mentioned earlier, is dedicated to developing the expansion, securing CSWE approvals, hiring faculty, recruiting new field placements, and admitting new students. Next slide. With that, I will turn it back to Michelle to see if there are any questions for me to address.
Thank you, Anne. There are 2 ways in which you may ask questions. One is in the chat. The other is you may raise the hand icon. You'll find the hand icon on the top of your screen with your reactions button. Once you raise your hand, you'll be placed in a queue. I'll call on you. Your mic will be enabled and you'll need to unmute yourself. To unmute yourself, the mic button is at the top of the screen. Please mute yourselves after speaking and lower your hand icon. All right, so I do see some folks. I see Maria Gorola, who has raised her hand. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Again, Maria Gorola from Monterey Bay. I have a question about accreditation, and you mentioned that you gave time during the first couple years of the revamping of the program. Accreditation takes around 3 years to get, but I was wondering if you are providing time also to get ready to submit for accreditation, because it will take probably another year to get all the documentation ready and also to approve the program, a new program. I'm talking about a new program, a new BSW from our university to be approved. So will that be taken into account too during the waiting, or when you are allowing to get the new accreditation, because it will take more than 3 years to get the accreditation? You mentioned it's January 31st, 2026. So this is around 4 years. Would they be more time to ramp up before getting to the accreditation stage, the beginning?
Thank you for that question. In our conversations with Council on Social Work Education, they explained to us that it's a 30 to 36 month period. It sounds like you're saying it's longer. I can't, we're going by what the council advised us of. And there is always the potential for contract extensions if absolutely necessary, but our plan is to secure, is to promote new programs to go online by spring of 2026.
By spring 2026. Yeah, because it does take 3 years once you get to CSWE. But by the time you get to CSWE, you have to have the approval from the campus that they're going to do the program. And also we have to have all the paperwork set up to apply for accreditation. That will take probably 6 to 9 months to prepare. Well, thank you. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you. And anything more with that
Keep going.
question? Okay, great. I'm going to go in between chat and hand raise. Sarah Taylor in the chat. Hi, is it really 9 months, not 12, for preparation, assuming funding begins in December?
We will be advising awarding the grants in December, but we will advise grantees of their selection earlier. So you will have some advance time to do some preliminary work between the time you're announced as a grantee and the execution of the actual contract. So it could be up to a year, depending on when you anticipate you're going to enroll your first cohort.
Thank you. Hand raised, Kim. I apologize for mispronouncing your last name, Mikyung. Please
Yes,
unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Mikyung Kim Go from Cal State Fullerton. So I reviewed the guide, the grant guide, and there is an evaluation criteria for this grant program that was on attachment A. And I would like some clarification because some of the items seems to be evaluation of the field agencies and not necessarily our grant proposal, our program. So, for example, there is a category, the proportion of children and adolescents served by the agency, which is category 3, and that's has to do with the agency and not the program itself. And then number 7, strategies to recruit and support employees from underrepresented communities. So are we looking at what the agencies are doing, or is that our program, proposed program?
We're going to talk about the evaluation later in this webinar, so I'm going to defer your question until Kevin McElvey makes his presentation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. In the chat from Peter Allen Lee, we have an accredited BASW program in an on-campus, in-person format. Would creating an online option for our BASW program using HCI funds be considered a new program? CSWE would require us to submit a substantive change form to get approval to do this.
We would not consider that a new program. As you say, you're submitting to CSWE a substantive change and not a request for a new program.
Hand raised, Camille Henderson, please unmute yourself.
Good morning. How are you? I'm Camille Henderson. I'm from Cal State Dominguez Hills. We have an accredited MSW program. However, the information that you shared regarding program expansion is something that I'd like clarification on, because it sounds like you would support, it would be appropriate to apply for funds to support activities that would increase admissions around diverse populations. However, my question is, does it have to be something that we would need to submit to CSWE, or is it just essentially sort of new programming that would support those efforts?
So as you've described your program, it would be a program expansion. Our understanding is that expansion requires hiring new faculty in order to sustain the appropriate CSWE required ratio of student to faculty. And you would have to engage with CSWE in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in the chat from Jolene Swain, will the PPT be shared? Yes, it is on our website. I'll place the link to the PPT in a moment in the chat. In the chat from Aisha Thomas, does the grant allow for postmaster's professional development of social workers?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Yes, I'm sorry. From Aisha Thomas, does the grant allow for postmaster's professional development of social workers?
It does not. It is to support expansion of MSW students and new programs. I think at this point, in the interest of time, will address any questions that people have with their hands raised. They could put them in the chat, and then we'll circle back as time allows later to address those. And I'll turn it back to you, Michelle, for the next
Okay.
part of the program.
Sounds great. I still have the chat questions in there. Keep putting them in the chat. And our next presenter is John Magis, Grant Sections Chief with Healthcare Workforce Development. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Right now, I'm going to go over the grant application basics. There is an online application form that's available off of our website. There's also a link to that online application through this webinar slide deck and in our grant guide itself. When you go to the SWIS application 2022 link, you will have the option of selecting the type of program that you wish to expand or establish, such as the MSW program expansion, a new MSW program, or a new BASW program. You will also have the opportunity to preview the application before completing the application by clicking on the link to look at a PDF version of the application. And we strongly encourage you to do that, because that way you'll have an opportunity to review all the questions ahead of time, and then it'll make it easier for you to fill out the application when you do it online. Next page. Okay. So with the, as part of the application requirements, you'll be asked to provide your current and or proposed field placement sites. You'll be asked to identify the type of setting. For example, if it's an FQHC or a county behavioral health clinic, there'll be a whole list of selections to choose from, or you can select other and identify the type of setting. You will also be asked to upload a letter of sustainability committing the sponsoring organization to support the new BASW and or MSW for adding additional MSW students. So but we want to ensure that once the grant funding ends, we want to ensure that you will be able to sustain the program beyond the funding that the grant provides. Next slide. So with the budget, so when you submit your proposed budget for new BASW and or MSW programs, eligible programs may receive up to $1.5 million in funding. So that means all of that, you can ask for reimbursement up to $1.5 million for the costs for developing a new program. For the expansion of an existing MSW program, we have a capitation rate so that eligible programs may receive $120,000 total per filled first-year positions for up to 25 new students for up to 3 years. And the total number of new students that you propose to add will determine the size of your budget. And then finally, indirect costs are not funded under this program. And then finally, key dates. As you know, the grant application was released on August 29th. The grant application deadline is October 28th at 3 p.m. We intend to send out a notice of awardees on November 29th, and our projected grant agreement start date will be January 27th of 2023. And now I'll send it over to Michelle for any questions.
Thanks, John. In the
Well-
chat, in the chat from Soma Sen, would developing certificates within the existing MSW program to expand skills and capacities of the students in certain areas be supported by this grant?
Well, this is to expand the number of students. I mean, the program itself can provide additional training, but we're not funding the expansion of the training. We're funding the expansion of slots. The number of student positions or students, that the program will be admitting. So our program is to add the number of students, not necessarily to fund the expansion of the training program itself. But you can definitely, you are welcome to include additional training for, additional courses and programs for your students, but the funding itself is tied to the number of students.
And Soma Sen says, thank you. I do see some hands in the chat. I don't know if you still have questions. Mikyong, Kim? If you want to mute yourself, okay. Camille Henderson, if you have another question, raise hand in the chat. Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to call on Laura Abrams. If you unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you. This goes to my question and Sarah's. Could you explain what you mean by expansion? So, with the incremental funds. So let's say we add 25 seats in year one, and then we keep our population at that, to make it simple, 100, we go from 100 to 125, and then the next year we're still at 125. We've added 25 seats each year, or do you have to keep going up each year to consider that incremental expansion? So from like 100 to 125 to then 150. What
Right.
are we? Yeah, the cascade effect, most of us do not understand.
So if the program, for example, was without this grant funding, was going to have 100 students per year, and you're adding an additional 25 each year, then that's what would be funded, 25 each year. So every new student that's added each year, the program will support adding students. So like for full-time students, the program will support up to 25 new students in year two, which is the 23-24 fiscal year. Mm-hmm. And it would support adding 25 new students in 24-25 and supporting 25 new students up to year four, which is 25-26. So
just let me ask, because this is what's confusing most of us. So does that just means that it's 100, then 125, then 125, then 125, or is it 100, 125, 150, 175?
Okay. Well, let me put it this way. We're funding the new students that you're adding each year, and the 125 covers the total costs for that student's education, for that training. So if it's if you're adding 25 the first year, it may cover, for example, 2 years of courses or 2 years of students being trained. But then in year two, if you wish to have funding for an additional 25 students that may cover a couple more years, then it would be, I guess, as you put it, 25 the first year, 50 the second year, and so forth. But it's the new first year students that are being funded for each year.
Yeah, so that still doesn't totally answer my question, but maybe someone else can ask in a different way.
John, let me jump in here and see if I can help. So you have a choice. You could admit one cohort in 23-4, and that you would get 120,000 for all this, up to 25 students for cohort 1. Or you could decide you're going to have 2 or 3 cohorts, and you would get 120 for each segment of up to 25 each academic year. So your choice. You could either just admit 25 your first year out, or a first academic year, 23-4, and sustain that. You would have 25 more students, or you could have 50 more or 75 more max. Does that help?
I think so. I'm not totally clear, but I'll figure it out. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne.
Well, also, you'll see an email address, so feel free to email offline when the webinar's finished, and so we can help you further explain. And I believe you had asked for a visual of this question, Laura. Is that correct?
Yes. The question is, are you always measuring it against the baseline or the previous year? So I think that's that's the main question. Is the extra measured against your baseline or against what you admitted last year? So those are two different things. But it may just be me who's very confused. So
I think that an easy way to look at it would be you're measuring it against the baseline, and we're funding up to 25, per cohort or per year. So you're measuring against the baseline. So but every first year student is where you get the funding. So so if you just wish to support funding for 25 students in your first year, and that's it, then that's how much would be funded. But if you're adding an additional 25 to the original 25, then you get additional funding. It's up to you to decide how much funding you wish to have for the number of students you're going to be adding each year.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Laura. In the chat from Christine Sketter. Good morning. I have several questions about references in the scoring guide, which I can specify when it's my turn. Thank you. Christine, you want to unmute yourself? Because I see you have other questions in the chat.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. And appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to ask, there are a couple of questions that ask about the percent of Medi-Cal threshold languages spoken by clients served by the agency. And we just want to make sure that I understand, and I ask this a little bit later as well. You refer to the agency a couple of different times, and it's unclear if you're looking for us to kind of select a key agency that we focus on, or if we have an opportunity to expand on all of the agencies that are, that are relevant for this proposal. So we're just trying to understand if you mean patients or clients served by the agencies, or are you referring to our students?
Can I jump in? I think there's a question that is asking how many active second-year behavioral health field placement sites does your program use in the MSW program? And and those questions, I'll get into the scoring criteria in the next section, but those would be asked about for each. If you said, for instance, that you have 5 active second-year behavioral health field placement sites, those questions would be asked of each of those.
Got it. Okay, so then when you get into how many are Medi-Cal or provide the percent of Medi-Cal threshold languages, the location, in underserved communities, like all of those things, right, are going to be asked of each site, each agency, is what you're saying, correct?
Yeah. Well. Okay. Yeah, I'll get into a little more detail, but it's we'll ask for the address, and then we have like a database of whether it's rural, urban, frontier, what its HPSA designation is. So mostly you'll just provide the address and the payer mix, and we'll be scoring the rest.
Okay, I may want to follow up when we get past the scoring part. And then I had other questions, but I want to step back and give space. I can go later with the others. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And a reminder, this is a 90-minute webinar, so I believe we're going to have plenty of time for the Q&As. Hand raise, Nancy Meyer Adams, please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My question, I mean, I'm with Laura there and I put it in the chat. I think what maybe some of us are wondering, so if we increase, so I have 100, I increase it to 125 for 23, 24. I get the 120,000 for the students for that first year. Will I also get 120,000 to support them in year 2? Or year 2 then is we've absorbed the cost of these 25 extra students?
Well, the funding that you receive covers the entire costs for those first year students for the entire period that they're being admitted for the program. So
Okay.
And so every year that you're adding additional students up to 25 will be funded. So but that initial amount covers the total amount that would be funded for the entire for their education under the program.
Okay, so that to me, I don't know about my colleagues, but I think that's helpful. I mean, one of the things obviously is going back to the CSWE, the ratio, right? So, I mean, if we're hiring that, I would have to hire faculty to add 25 students. And so that if I only have 120,000, that's not going to help me keep those students enrolled for the 2 or 3 years without finding additional money, because that salary would take that up. But that came from all the questions in the chat. My original hand raise was about, I know when we first spoke with you all, and we know that not only do we need resources on campus to have more students, but we need these agencies, we need people, we need field instructors. I mean, for me, that's why I get 1,100 applications and can only accept 200 students, because I don't have enough agencies. Is that 120 that we would get for, say, these 25 students, is that supposed to help us secure more field sites? Because that then gets very complicated in an area like LA where we're all sharing these sites. I'm just not sure if we thought about how we're going to secure the agencies to support the 7 schools in LA, adding 25 students each, for instance.
Understood. Well, the funding itself, I mean, that would be the entire amount of financial support that would be provided under this program. So there wouldn't be a separate allocation of funds to help you secure these different sites or different locations. So that would be up to your program. But the way our program is set up is that that 120,000 per field position, that covers the expense for the training. It covers all of the funds associated with adding those additional students each year.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the chat from E. Maxwell Davis, it seems to me that if the goal is to enhance student access and increase enrollment numbers, expansion needs to include new formats, not just new degrees.
Well, our program is specifically set out for degrees for the MSW and BASW programs, and so, but I understand your concerns, and we appreciate that, and we'll take that into consideration since we're going to be offering this grant cycle every year, and every time we get suggestions for ways that we can improve the program, we can try to look at any additional changes.
Thanks, John. This is Maxwell, and I just want to say, yeah, in our, in previous discussions we've been having about, another HKI project, I just think that I know that your goal is to expand numbers of students as well as the diversity of the student body, and so I think some of the things folks have suggested, like taking an MSW program that's available only face-to-face right now and adding a part-time option or a hybrid option or an online option, according to the literature, excellent ways of both expanding the footprint of the degree program and enhancing the diversity of the students enrolled. So I sort of would like to encourage you all to consider that. It also may be faster to get those kinds of new enrollment options approved by CSWE than an entirely new degree program.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. I appreciate that. I wanted to circle back on the other question regarding recruitment and field placement sites. In the budget detail, if you take a look at the sample grant agreement and also what in the PDF of the application, under the budget detail, there are several line items, and one of the line items does include expenses for recruitment and retention of field placements. So that can be utilized. Some of the funds can be utilized specifically for that under this program.
Thanks, John. Thank you, everyone. Excited to hear all this robust Q&A. I'm going to start with our next presenter, and then we can continue with our Q&A when he completes his presentation. Kevin McAvilly, Research Data Specialist. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Camera's turning on still, I think. Try again. I'm Kevin McAvilly, Research Data Specialist at HCI, and we've touched a little bit on scoring, but hopefully I can answer everyone's questions about scoring here. So first of all, going over the scoring criteria for the expansion programs. Scoring will be done for programs who apply for a maximum of 25 students on their compared to their baseline per year. So that's a total of new part-time students and new full-time students scored up to 25. Then there's a question about advanced standing, and full points are given whether advanced standing exists or if the program will establish or reestablish advanced standing for BSW students. And then, as we went over briefly before, we ask how many, let me look up the wording again exactly, how many active second-year behavioral health field placement sites does your program use in the MSW program? And for that, we ask a series of questions, including the address. And with the address, we can find the mental health HPSA score, if it's a rural or frontier placement site. And then we also ask for each active second-year behavioral health field placement site, the payer mix. If you go to the next slide, please. Earlier in the application, we asked about the language spoken by graduates, and it's scored by the percent of graduates who speak Medi-Cal threshold languages. And we ask a series of questions about the program's strategies and how they're aligned with HCI's goals, including recruitment strategies, strategies to promote student success, workforce in areas of unmet need strategies, and strategies to implement culturally responsive care training into the program's curriculum. Next slide, please. The scoring criteria for the new programs are very similar, BASW, BSW, and the MSW programs. It's based on new program admission numbers. Full points are given past 60, but partial points are kind of tiered below 60 students per year. Then we ask the same series of questions about recruitment strategies. And these are the only scored questions for the new programs, but it's not the entire application. There are a few more questions that we need for a complete application. Next slide, please. For all the successful applicants, we will require an annual program report to receive ongoing funding. This will include numbers and socio-demographic data on the applicants and the admitted students for the program. Another series of questions about HCI values and principles in the training materials, and then a budget table for each year about expenditures in the annual budget with total grant amount awarded. We'll send this each year. Usually it will come out in the summer, and we'll be given about a month to complete the form and send it back to us to receive the ongoing funding. So that was quick, but I think that leaves us some extra time for questions.
Great, thank you, Kevin. I see a hand raised, Laura Abrams. Oh, okay. All right, so
No,
we have.
that was a mistake. No hand raised.
That's okay, Laura. All right, going to chat. Nancy Meyer Adams, hello. Are there any funds for expansion of existing BASW programs that could then lead to expansion of our advanced standing program? Thank you.
We have only 3 applications: an expanded MSW, and then a new BASW/BSW, and a new MSW. So the advanced standing would just come into place, or come into it would become a factor in the expansion program application. I'm not sure that answers your question. But no, there's currently no application or awards for expanded BASW or BSW programs.
All right, hand raised. Maria, please.
I'm thinking about what you explained with the budget, and you talk about students in the program. If we're going through the process of for a new program, I'm thinking about a PSW. We're looking at the timing of accreditation and when the program begins and when we start admitting students. How is the budget will be looking like in the first year or so when we still don't have students?
Would you mind if I take a shot at this, Kevin?
No,
So,
please.
just to clarify, so in the case of expansion, you have a year to develop and secure faculty. And digressing a moment to what Maxwell raised earlier about distance learning, we're open to that. I know faculty that are teachers on distance learning at CSUs. So that is an option for people to propose. Relative to expansion, the idea is that they would enroll beginning in their second year. However, we've also learned subsequently that it may take a little longer and they might not admit till their third year. And that's totally up to you as an applicant. When it comes to new programs, going back to the purpose of the grant for new programs is to secure accreditation. It is not to support their first year of admissions and to address the work that would occur between accreditation and enrollment. We anticipate that over that 3-year period or more, that you would actually be working with your university to put the mechanisms in place for sustaining the program once it's accredited.
Thank you so much.
In the chat from Christine Scudder, field placement question. Is the focus on field placement sites that cater to children and our youth, or field placement sites that serve the behavioral health needs of other populations?
It is both. It is, yes, the emphasis of the program is behavioral health workforce, and the source of funding for this first year is from the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative enacted last year in the budget, which is children up through age 25. We recognize going forward that there will be funding, and in fact, that was 30 million of the 60 million allocation, and the second 30 million is coming from generic behavioral health. So it would encompass adults, but we are really hoping to see programs that support children and youth because that's a serious need.
You hand raise, Mikyon Kim Ji. Please unmute.
Yes. So would you please clarify the recruitment? Is that so? Are we talking about recruitment of new students, or in the guide, the grant guide, that it says recruit and support employees from underserved communities? So, so the clarification would be helpful. We're talking about students, right?
Students, yeah. Let me see the wording in the application.
It says number 7 on in the evaluation criteria guide.
In the application, the wording is, please select the strategies you currently use to recruit and support students from underrepresented communities.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Ronnie Swartz in the chat. Assuming new admits would not start until fall, can we still request funds in spring 2023 to prepare? There's a column for that in the application, but there wouldn't be any students then.
So to clarify, this is the single opportunity to seek funding to support the program. And as I mentioned a little earlier, you could admit not in your second year, but in the spring of 2024 or the fall of 2024. So you figure out what you think you need to build your program expansion and determine when you're going to admit students.
From Christine Scudder in the chat, will the grant application expand to allow us to report on more than one field placement site? It appears we are asked about the agency several times, but we have multiple active behavioral health sites.
Yeah, the application limits the field placement sites to 200. So definitely there will be a chance to enter in data for more than one.
In the chat from Laura Abrams, I have a question about the incremental seats. You want to unmute yourself, Laura, for that?
I think we addressed that.
Okay.
My later question is, can we admit for next fall? For fall 23? Or is it the earliest is fall 24?
I think you could propose it and we would discuss your application.
Okay, but it's not, so, because the application field says how many seats are you adding in 23, I think, so, but
Right.
here you're saying 24?
So our expectation was that people needed a year to plan.
Okay.
And yeah.
Thank you.
Sarah Taylor in the chat. So is a maximum of 9 million available then for 25 students a year for 3 years for this expansion grant?
It could be if you were fully funded for 3 cohorts at 25 students per cohort.
Hand raised, Nancy Meyer Adams, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, and this may have been answered, but so for those of us who have advanced standing programs who start in summer, I mean, if we were awarded this, could we actually be able to admit those 25 into advanced standing that starts summer of 23, or would we need to wait until summer of 24? And if that's too specific, I can send it later.
We understand your question. I think we didn't anticipate admissions to advanced standing in the first year of the, and I understand what you're saying. It doesn't start in the fall, it starts in June, July. So we will take that under consideration.
Thank you. I can explain how it works in the application. Thank you.
Thank you.
From Carolyn McAllister. So if we have 100 students, we typically admit at baseline. We need to go to 125 admissions for each year. And then for each of those years, we could receive up to 120,000 for those 3 years.
And I think we were chatting amongst us as directors to try to figure out if we understood it. So I think there's a bunch of chats in there that are about this. Like, yeah. we're wanting to make sure we're not going to 100, 125, and then admit another, like, if that makes sense. Because we'll end up going from 100, like, we'll have 50 then. in 2 years' time, we'd have 50 students because we'd be admitting 25 and we'd have 25. So that's what we were trying to figure out.
Yes.
Yes, I see back and forth in the chat. And then Laura suggests, I think HCI should make a visual with a budget we can reference. All right, hand raised. I just want to make sure I'm covering all Nancy Meyer Adams, all your questions.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Hand raised, Kim Mayer.
Hi, everybody. Question on slide number 12, which the title is Grant Application Budget, and another budget clarification. Under the expand existing MSW programs, eligible programs may receive $120,000 total per filled first year position for up to 25 new students for up to 3 years. So does that mean if I admit 25, I plan for 25, but let's say for some reason I less than that actually enter the program for whatever reason, does that impact, how does that impact my budget if they are not technically filled by the end of that first academic year?
I think I can answer that question. This is John Madriz. The way we do our payments, we make payments in arrears. So
Okay.
it's based on what you report each year. So if the number is less, then the reimbursement would be less for each year. So it's based on annual payments in arrears.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Question in the chat from Christine Scudder, and I see some comments with this, but I want to throw it out to the team. The RFP application states, please be sure that your budget totals do not exceed 120,000 per student, 60,000 per year full-time, or 40,000 per year part-time. What does the additional 20,000 include or refer to?
I believe that's just, if I'm understanding your question correctly, it's just 120,000 for a full for the course of the 3 years. If it's the same total funding per student. Is that answering your question, or did I misunderstand?
Well, I guess I'm saying if we can't exceed 60 for full-time or 40 for part-time, right? Then how do you get to 120? I guess it's a little confusing how it's written. And so we just want to understand that.
So we got to 120 based on a full-time 2-year course study and a 3-year part-time course of study, but it's 120 per student over the course of their studies.
Hand raised, John Won Min.
Hi, good morning. This is Min from San Diego State University. Just one quick question. I know that there are 3 options in terms of funding categories, which is new PASW and the new MSW programs, and the third one is MSW expansion programs. Does the program is the program limited to applying for only one of the 3 categories?
Yes.
Meaning, or is it something that, you know, if the school is interested in establishing a new PASW program and then expansion of the MSW program, then it requires 2 proposals. But this, question is, each school is limited to 1 proposal?
You can have multiple proposals. You could expand your MSW program and you could apply for new funding to establish a BASW or BSW program.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Comment in the chat from Jolene Swain. Field programs would need additional support to coordinate internships focused on IBH. Also in the chat from Jolene Swain, are points only given to integrated behavioral health internships in urban areas? You spoke of rural and frontier.
The rural and frontier will be a factor in scoring if there is a presence of the field placement sites in rural and frontier areas. That will include some additional points in scoring, but it's not necessary.
Hand raised, Laura Abrams.
Okay, this is an easy question now this time. The application says, how many current students do you admit? That's a little bit different from enroll. So, because we all have different take rates. I think that's an error on the application, but could you clarify what that means? So on the PDF of the application, it says, how many students did you admit in the last 3 years? But that number does not determine how many enrolled.
You're right. It should be enrolled. Are missing. Yeah.
Okay, so you want to send out a new PDF or?
We'll work internally to correct it.
Well, people who aren't on this call might fill it out incorrectly, so.
I appreciate that, Laura.
Okay.
In the chat from Peter Allen Lee, could you clarify, please, if funds can be used for student tuition costs, stipends, and/or scholarships?
Hello, this is John. One thing I can say is that there is a budget line item for student financial support, specifically for the expansion of MSW programs. So it's up to you to decide what type of financial support you're providing. And then you'll have an opportunity to tell us what your intent is. But we do have a line item specifically for student financial support.
Hand raised, Kelly Scott, please unmute yourself.
Hi, since it's based on the number of students enrolled, if a student, for whatever reason, needs to take a leave of absence, is that payment for that year no longer provided, or how does that work for leave of absences?
I don't believe we've covered leave of absence, but I know with other programs that we've supported, such as stipend programs, if a student has a leave of absence, we just need to be notified in writing. The fact that a student is maybe missing a semester, for example, and then you would just notify us of that. The funding that's provided is for the entire costs of educating that one student. So the assumption would be that that student would come back after the leave of absence and finish their educational commitment. So you would just notify us of that, so that way we're aware that a particular student may take longer to complete their education.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
In the chat from Laura Abrams, I don't know if this has been posed yet by you, but also the RFP talks about focusing on children up to age 25. In this PPT, you talk about children and adult behavioral health. Can you clarify if this includes all ages?
I think we covered that earlier. Thank you.
Hand raised, Ronnie Swartz, please unmute.
Hey, everybody who I haven't seen in a long time, by the way. Here's my question. It's 120 per new student. If we're admitting the new students to start in the fall, is that 120 spread out so we can use some of it in spring? Or are you saying we can put funding for this upcoming spring, even though there wouldn't actually be new people in seats until fall? And I'm not asking about a new program. I'm asking about like we're adding seats.
I think we are basing our design on a fall, spring academic year. If you're talking about admissions and enrollment in spring, is that correct?
No, I'm saying like, so this spring we need to ramp things up so that we can have 5 more students in the fall. So in the fall, we would get the 120 to cover a student over 2 years. But what happens this spring in order to like prepare for the new people to start in the fall?
John, do you want to talk about the budgeting and the arrears factor?
Yes. So the first year of the budget is the 22-23 fiscal year, which is the current year that we're in. So when we're talking about the $120,000 per student, that is a capitation rate that's used to determine the amount of the overall budget for your program. So you can include in your budget details some expenses in year one, which is the 22-23 year, which would help help with the being able to expand the existing MSW program. So you could provide some funding, or you can include it in your budget for this first year, along with the year 2, year 3, all the way to year 5. So you could budget for it, but just keep in mind the $120,000 per student is a capitation rate. It just basically it determines the amount, the total amount of the award, of the grant award provided for the expansion of your program. And you could, it's up to you as an applicant to decide if you wish to use some of those funds in the first year.
In the chat from Sarah Taylor, can you provide some clarification? For example, providing information about our field sites. We work with over 100 agencies. Will the newly added students be restricted to a small number of sites? And we should describe those in the application.
There's no restriction as to where you place them. What we are scoring you on, however, is the availability of behavioral health placements for the second year.
Yeah, it's right next to the lapels. Michelle, can I hop in also? This is Ross Lalian. I'm the Health Workforce Development Research and Evaluation Chief here at HCI. Just want to reiterate a point Kevin made. In the application, there's about 200 different sites you could list out. So you're not going to be limited to a select number of sites. Just want to point that out.
Thank you, Chris.
Could I ask everyone to mute who is not talking?
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Ross. Please feel free to raise your hand in the chat. I see a hand raised. John Wongmin, please.
Sorry, I already asked questions. Sorry, I'll lower my hand. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. I'm back in the chat. And making sure Ronnie Swartz from 1148. The question what that means for adding new seats, not new program. Make sure that's answered. Laura Abrams from 1148. We don't have to admit for fall 2023.
I think that was answered already. Thank you.
Thank you. Jolene Swain. Are points only given to integrated behavioral health internships in urban areas? Oh, I think we already went through that. You spoke of rural and frontier. Keisha Thomas, what items qualify as indirect costs in the grant?
There are no indirect costs.
Right. Thank you, Anne. From Christine Scudder, the RFP application asks if we have a BASW program, which we do, and if we offer advanced standing students to BASW students. We do not, because we cannot. We can only do this for BSW students. This is something you addressed at the beginning of the webinar today. Will we receive a point deduction for saying no?
And just to clarify, this is Christine, correct. And Nancy, thank you for your point in the chat. Our BASW program is not accredited. And so, you know, because those questions follow each other, that's the reason for my question. Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah Taylor in the chat.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I still have the question. So
Could
I'm
you
asking if
restate the
there's a point.
question?
Sure. So if
Thank
we
you.
have a there's a question about whether we have a BASW program, which we do, but it's not accredited. And therefore, we cannot then in turn offer those students advanced standing. Does that make sense? That's available to students with BSW or from BASW programs that are accredited. So because we cannot do that, I'm asking if we would get a point deduction for that.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Taylor's question in the chat. To follow up on Ronnie's question earlier, if we were to admit more students in fall 2023, it might be helpful for us to be able to provide spring or summer stipends to faculty for establishment of additional field sites, field advising, any curricular updates or training needed, etc.
We leave it to the applicant to determine how they want to spend the total funds calculated based on new admissions. So if you admit 25 new students in 23-4, that would mean you'd have 3 million, if my math is correct, I believe. How you spend that is your decision, including these activities. And if you look at the PDF of the application, you'll see that there are a range of categories for which the funds could be used, including several points for others.
Thank you, Anne. Hand raised, Sylvia Barragon, please unmute yourself.
Hi, Kevin, this question's for you. You'd mentioned that in your scoring criteria, you would look at rural and frontier communities, you know, for grading purposes. And metropolises also have, you know, behavioral health deserts. And I'm wondering if you're going to consider ECBOs in your scoring somehow for special consideration?
We will include mental health HPSAs. I'm not sure what the overlap is there on what was the acronym again? Sorry. DCBOs?
Yes, ethnic community-based organizations.
But we will have points for mental health HPSA, the average score of the training facilities, and then points for a presence in rural or frontier communities.
Thank you.
In the chat from Aisha Thomas, what is the minimum threshold of sites we should provide information on?
I'll take this one, Michelle. This is Ross Lally and Asha. So there's no minimum threshold. We just want all the sites that are actually being used for training. There's up to 200 sites you could actually enter in the application. We just want all the sites that are being used for training. Hopefully that's helpful.
In the chat from Jerry Shapiro, what is the total amount of funds available for the 120,000 student admits?
As someone brought up earlier, if there are 25 new students each of the 3 years, the total funding that could be applied for is $9 million.
All right, and a hand raised, Jerry Shapiro, please unmute.
Yeah, going back to that question, I'm trying to understand where $175 million or 60 million or 30 million. I mean, all of us are dazzled by 120,000 per student. And thinking in terms of 3 cohorts of 25, that's really an appealing number in terms of funding. But I'm trying to pin down what's the total limit of funds available. Because when I begin to do the division, for example, on 30 million, it gives me a somewhat different picture of things.
So remembering that these are competitive grants, the goal here is to enable each applicant to apply for up to 9 million. But again, it'll be a very competitive process, and that's why the scoring is so essential to this.
Yeah, but Anne, can you give me the number? What's the total number that HCI is setting aside to say, okay, here's the total number of funds that we're going to be allocating?
So we have allocated 60 million for this program.
Thank you.
Okay. In the chat, Christine Scudder, how would you define an active field placement, for example, used for a second-year placement within the past year, 3 years, etc.?
I'll take this one, Michelle. This is Ross Lalian. So I think the way we did, the way we're defining, that's a really good question, is sites that you plan on using for training. So when you say, for example, if you had 25 new students in year 1, which training sites are you going to use for those 25 students throughout their training? And I know that number is going to vary by program, but does that help?
It does, thank you. And just to clarify, because if we think about them for a 2-year program, you really want us to focus on the sites we'd be using for their second year, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's right, thank you.
Peter Allen Lee, hand raised.
Hello, everyone, and thank you also for your patience in answering all of our questions. My question is about clarifying or helping me understand the word supplant. And then supplanting a fund. So that's referenced on page 7 and also on page 25 of the guide. So an example would be if we have students that are also interested in other training programs that we already have, does supplant then mean that they can't apply to both or cannot be funded by both sources? Or can you give other examples about what supplant means?
So supplant would be if you got from Hewlett Packard a $10 million grant to expand your admissions, and then you come to HCI and request 10 million, well, up to 9 million. We do not want to see our money used to supplant the first grant for you to then use differently. We are supporting new activity.
So it doesn't mean, oh, go ahead.
And I was going to say, it is distinct from the question of new and expansion. So you could have an expansion grant and you could have a new grant, and those are just separate funding streams.
Okay, so so it doesn't mean that we can't, obviously we have multiple funding sources, but that just means we should be making sure that the HCI funds are only used for the purposes of what we propose and not offsetting or using in place of our other programs. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yeah.
All right, in the chat from Aisha Thomas following up, I was referring to the evaluation criteria for SWEES grant program on page 11 of the guide. You want to jump on and unmute yourself, Aisha, make sure your question was covered.
Hi, Go back to the guide. So the evaluation criteria, the element says provide the percentage of Medi-Cal threshold languages spoken by clients served by the agency, right? So just some clarification on that. Hello?
Can we actually follow up with you about that?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Asha, this is Ross Lalian. Could you just clarify what the question is? I'm sorry, wasn't
So
following.
I was looking at page 11 of the guide, and I just wanted some clarification on some of the elements and how we describe that and how, in the grant itself.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin, I think we could probably answer some of this, right? It's how we're collecting data within the application. So it's based on the training sites that you're proposing to use for the second year for these students. And we ask you basically the clients that are being served by the respective agency, what languages do those folks speak? And then it's aggregated by language group. So for Spanish, for example, you say 30%.
Can I stop you? The application is asking actually about the language question in the application. Let me find the actual language for that. We're collecting information about your student demographics from the past 3 years. Please enter the languages spoken at a level of professional proficiency by your students by graduating year for the past 3 years.
Okay, thank you. So I was wondering if it's about the students or the clients, actually.
The question in the application is about the students.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Kevin, and maybe we need to get back. Isn't there so as part of the field placement site spreadsheet, aren't we asking about client languages spoken as stated in page 11 of the grant guide?
No, there's
okay. Sorry about that. I was confused then.
Well, it does say clients on the guide.
We will discuss that internally and get back to the group.
Hand raised, Tony
Thank
Nacarado.
you.
Oh, excuse me. Hand raised, Tony Nacarado. Please unmute yourself, Tony. Tony, I'll come back. Hand raised, Mikyon Kim, G.
Oh, so it's along the line of the evaluation criteria in the guide, page 11. As you are reviewing those, whether it's a student or the client, please check number 7 as well, so that the wordings are in alignment with the actual application, because that's still there's that the lack of clarity as to whether we are evaluating the clients or students. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. We'll fix that.
Thank you. And Tony? You're unmuted, I see. Please ask your question. Tony, I don't know if you're having technical difficulties, but feel free to place your question in the chat. I'm going to go to Laura Abrams in the chat. Assuming there is no commitment to post MSW career choice, would we be required to track if the student goes to public behavioral health?
Yeah, thank you. Just overall thinking about the goal of the grant and the expected output, it didn't seem like there's a requirement of owing back, like there's not like 4E stipends, or there isn't they have to sign something committed to public behavioral health. So I guess I was just thinking about, how do you envision tracking what those particular students do with their career.
I'll take this one. So we have the annual report that Kevin described a little bit ago. Kevin, I don't know if you want to hop in and describe that further. There's also like some of these folks are going to go towards licensure, and then ACE kind of collects licensure data. So we're going to be able to track folks that way as well. Kevin, do you want to add anything about the annual report data that we're going to collect?
It will, yeah, it will include a worksheet on the students enrolled and accepted and students who apply to the program, as well as some budgetary questions and questions about the curriculum of the program. Usually they go out in the summer around the 1st of June or 1st of July and are due a month later on the 31st.
Thanks, Kevin. So we're asking the programs to provide us with data about their students longer term, right?
Yes.
We're not asking. Okay, so we're not asking for that. Thank you.
Hand raised, Jerry Shapiro, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to follow up and direct attention to that infamous page 11 in terms of languages. It seemed like the years were not in alignment with where we're currently at. Should we provide additional information in terms, for example, of our current class, the languages that are in play, or should we stick to the years that are specifically listed on page 11?
In the application, the years that we will ask for are 1819, 1920, and 2021.
And Jerry, we have to update page 11. We're going to update the grant guide and fix that error, and we apologize for that.
Oh, that's great, because I think that'll give you a much better picture. Thank you very much.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Also, alluding to page 11 in chat, Christine Scudder, we're capturing these comments and the team will work on that. Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Jerry. Any other questions from the chat that I may have missed and or raising your hand? We have a few more minutes. Great questions. Appreciate your, okay, Tony, hand raised. You are unmuted, so go ahead, ask your question. Tony, I'm sorry, we're just not able to hear your question. Please place it in the chat. We'll entertain questions for about another minute and then we'll wrap it up. All right, I do see some hand raised, but I don't know if I already got to the questions. Okay, feel free to place in the chat once again. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. As you see on the screen, we have the email address. Feel free to note it and send any more questions you may have. Appreciate your interaction, your participation. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Rizal, who's joined us. She's a Deputy Director for Healthcare Workforce Development, for closing comments. Thank you again.
Hello, everybody. As Michelle mentioned, I'm Karen Rizal here at HCI, and I wanted to just say thank you very much to all of you who took the time to attend this webinar. We are very excited about the opportunity to offer this program. As kind of was discussed at the beginning, you know, we recognize the importance of really building our social work workforce to serve in areas of California that need it, and we know that that's many places. And so we just really appreciate you taking the time to be here to ask thoughtful questions And we do look forward to your applications. And per some of the discussion today, we will make some, some adjustments to address any errors that you may have found for us. So we appreciate your attention to this program, and we're excited to be able to launch this for the first time. We will be posting the information about this today, I believe, on our website, as well as the webinar. But just encourage you that if you have any follow-on questions, to please email our email address so that our staff can continue to provide technical assistance. We also encourage you, if you're not already, to sign up for our mailing list for our monthly workforce programs update. We provide a monthly update of all of the different programs that we're offering here at HCI, and periodic updates for things that are coming out. So if you're not already subscribed, we encourage you to do so. And thank you again.